Yeah, so then Rabbi, you'd have the file, and then you could send it to someone to post or post.
Oh, that's so easy. Okay,
Can it
great.
go on?
And where will
Can
the
it go on
file
Rabbi's
appear?
website?
So it's recording.
It'll
I'm afterwards.
in Zoom.
Whatever. You'll counsel me afterwards. I don't want to waste your time. BZ, welcome.
Give it 2 months. We'll find out where the files
Sorry,
went.
I'm late.
That's okay. That's okay. Chutzpah of the grandest order, and we love you. BZ, you're never late.
Hey, I love you too, Rob.
Okay.
Not usually.
Meet what is really arguably one of the greatest cross sections of people who I love and admire in Derech. Wow, overwhelming seeing you all in one place. Okay, so I gave you a bit of an overview. Let's go back and let's consider some of the things that Iyov raises. Iyov is one of the most difficult of all Sfarim. Arguably, there are probably more commentaries written on Iyov than any other book in the Tanakh. There are legitimate Perushim, and there are a bunch of illegitimate ones. The Christians go nuts over Iyov and typically get it all wrong. They have their notion of what they call the patience of Job. You ever hear that expression before?
I think so.
Yeah, the patience of Job. It's actually a phrase in a book in what they call the New Testament. We don't believe there is such a thing as a New Testament, but the book of James has such a concept of the patience of Job, which already tells you that they did not do their homework, because that means they skipped the entire middle section, the 39 chapters between the beginning and the end. Because Job can be a lot of things, and he has his virtues. Patience, I wouldn't rank up there. He loses it pretty early on, as many people do when confronted with ultimate suffering. So you've heard the expression "patience of Job," yeah. It's an ironic phrase, and really not well chosen. It's featured prominently. Anybody happen to read? I was a big Russian literature buff in my day. The Brothers Karamazov. That a book anybody familiar with? Yeah, Shmuel, you look.
Of course not, Rabbi.
The Flying
That
Caramel.
book is like over 1,000 pages.
I know. I was a nut. I read all of it.
Way
In
too
the
hard.
same time period, I read The Brothers Karamazov, War and Peace, Anna Karenina, Crime and Punishment. I'm a lunatic. Anyway, it was, and Brothers Karamazov was a slow read. It was not easy, and the Job figures prominently, and of course, Brothers Karamazov it's all Russian Orthodox Christian and not precise. I mean, they're reading it with the veil of gauze over their eyes, and without real. I mean, look, we believe whenever you approach a book in the Tanakh, you need Chazal. The books are all closed. You need to be unlocked by the oral tradition. And so they don't have the oral tradition, but even just going to the text, they're clearly not even reading the text carefully, something that I hope that we will do correctly ourselves. The Chazal had kashiyas on many books in the Tanakh. They had great difficulty with the book of Yechezkel. But they had problems with Shir Hashirim. They had problems with Koheles. They sought to put some of them in the Gniza, in Shemos, away for good, because they were concerned that people would misunderstand them. It's funny. You would think that Iyov would be exactly that kind of a book, because it's juicy. I mean, it gets really, and sometimes it's dicey. But Iyov is not. They never suggest such a thing. Because it's considered, Chazal look at it as offering one of the most important and definitive approaches to suffering and to how we're supposed to deal with this life in this world. Chazal got clearly the way it's described, and there are a number of passages. This one I'm going to quote now is taken from the Gemara in Shabbos. It also comes from the Seches Sofrim. They were intrigued by Iyov. They were mystified by Iyov and obsessed with it, really. And here's the story. We learned that Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne learned it with Rabbi Yochanan in Tiberia, and said his comment after it describes them learning, it says, you got to put this book, Iyov, in the Geniza, not because it's too controversial for us, like in the case of the other books, but rather because of bittul beis medrash, meaning they were having too much fun with it. And as such, they figured that like they're not learning Shas and Poskim adequately.
Rabbi, what's the Geniza?
Geniza is where we put. It's a repository where we put all of our holy writings that we don't need anymore. Remember, you could picture we have a couple cardboard boxes around Derech, where like across from John's office, right? It says Shemos. And if you have all the old Xeroxes, they inevitably are all collecting dust on the tables around Derech. So you throw them in the box. Yeah, and then they eventually go to Geniza. We bury them because they're holy books, and we don't just throw them away indiscriminately. We want to show them proper respect. Ariel, welcome. Shammai, welcome. Gavi, welcome. I miss our schmoozes in the base medrash, and it's very, very nice to see all of you. Hi. I'm just introducing what we're doing, and we're doing this every night. The problem is it's such a big group. I hope you all I hope you're not just getting a little piece, couple insights, checking in and checking out. I would love to do this with some seriousness and depth.
Rabbi, I'm taking notes here. What are you talking?
Somebody has some questions?
Talking about
Comments or questions as we go?
Shammai.
What's up?
Shammai is the comment.
Okay.
My comment is no.
Fine. So I'm gonna continue then. But again, I encourage you feel loose and at ease here. Now, in terms of approaching, we're going to be talking about some of the major commentaries. There's the Rambam, the Ralbag, Malbi, Mitsudos. Most of these are major commentaries. The Rambam has a lot to say on Iyov. Interestingly, we don't think of the Rambam, the great Maimonides, somebody who comments at a regular basis on the Tanakh. But Iyov figures centrally in his most controversial book, The Guide to the Perplexed. So we will be spending a lot of time on the Rambam. But most of these other commentaries, they take a more generalized view. They see, meaning instead of, some of you are familiar with learning Tanakh, right? So if you look at Rashi, for example, the Mitsudos, they'll go pasuk by pasuk and explain each pasuk in its own context, right? And then you look at the whole book, and then cumulatively you get a sense of what just happened. With Iyov, it's so clear that we're dealing with grand, important themes. They take then more of a globalized look at everything and see, for example, the characters not just as people, but as prototypes, representing big ideas, big constructs. That'll make it really interesting for us. I mean, this is the introduction, so you'll have to take my word for it. But as we get into it and try to go into more depth, we'll see each of these figures representing a different way of thinking about life. Some do take the classic approach. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I feel like turning like Iyov into an archetype of a character only happened because there was so much information and lessons extrapolated from the story in the first place. He wasn't written as an archetype of a character in the first place. It was only based on what society later did to his story that made him more of a character type of bigger themes. But before that, he was just a story, no?
That's one of the intriguing parts, and this already goes back to the Gemara in Baba Basra. There's a machlokus about every detail in Iyov, including something pretty fundamental. Did the guy ever exist? And there's an opinion that the entire thing was a construct. He's a metaphor. It didn't actually happen. On some level, the book could be seen as a parable. I mean, it's too shocking to be believed, so it could be just that. The reason why I'm hesitant to go that way is because I feel like I've met Iyov. And I wonder if maybe some of you might personally even come to identify with the man. There's something about him that rings true, that feels like he's a guy that we know, or maybe he's us. So I'm identifying with what you're saying, but I'm also giving credence to the other side, to see him as an archetype, as some kind of a character figure who represents something. Both are possible approaches. I mean, I don't know if you're feeling this yet. This is different than anything we're used to. And our discussion tonight is not going to be classic Shas and Poskim. We're not going to be, and it's not going to be. It's a different kind of a tenor here. And it's very relatable. It's one of these books for the ages that every generation, as I said, the Rabbanim loved to. They dwelled on it. They sat in endless hours learning in the base medrash. We might do the same. Yeah, I mentioned it's a difficult book, but we'll get to it. It's accessible. One of the central themes, and let's just nail it in the beginning, is a term. I'll use the generic term. Do you know the word theodicy? I'm reluctant to use fancy words, but theodicy is a word, and you just can't avoid it in dealing with Iyov. It's the Christian philosopher Hume, I think, coined the phrase theodicy. It refers to this age-old question of why it appears to our mortal, limited perspectives that bad things happen to decent people, and conversely, of course, lots of good things seem to happen to unworthy people, even Rashaim. And how is that possible? Well, that's certainly what the prospect of Iyov opens up. This issue of why does life seem so unfair? And I'm going to quote Rabbi Eisenman in the Art Scroll. He has profound words. I think people take Art Scroll for granted, and especially these kinds of books. I'll hold it up again. I know a few of you came in late. It's really good, and I don't get a commission in trying to sell it. They just did a really good job, and it's a sophisticated work. Maybe intimidating because of its length, but it shouldn't be. You should be able to open it up if you want to buy it, look at it, read it. So he says,
put in the coupon code Bleiweiss when we order it online.
Yeah, that'll get you a "who's that" response, I think. Yeah, no discount on that one. Yeah, so I'm quoting Rav Eisenman here. He says, in dealing with these deep, hard questions of how is life fair, he says we're left with a nagging feeling of unease. The concept seems too big for us. Something within us rebels at such seeming arbitrary vulnerability. Oh, he's getting all art scrolly. I'll forgive. Let me translate this into English. What I think he's trying to articulate is that, wow, this feels relevant right now, no? Here we are, puny us in this world. And there's a sense of, how is this happening? I don't know if you're following, who's succumbing to coronavirus. There's some really finer people who are dying, and Hashem, we know that everything that Hashem does is for the best, but it doesn't make sense. You can't really you can give facile explanations. Anti-Semites or anti-religious Jews will say, aha, see what it gets them davening together? They all congregate, and then they deserve to get this disease. You ever hear that one? I heard somebody talking like that. What appears to the mortal mind is a certain sense of randomness. It's just happening. It's just unfolding. And that's certainly the way the modern world, the secular world, has it. Everything just kind of happens. There's no rhyme or reason. Even if many people, let's say, they believe in God, they believe more in the Aristotelian concept, the deist concept, that Hashem created the world and let us to go, and then it's all just kind of unfolding in a random kind of sequence. Somebody was going to say something.
Are we separating the question of why bad things happen to good people from the question of why does it seem random? Meaning, why is it not consistently, good people having kind of mild lives happen to them? Meaning, it looks random. A lot of good people are dying and a lot of bad people are dying. So it seems like there's really no structure. Or are we asking one question? Why do bad things happen?
Yeah, that's a very helpful distinction, right? I mean, we're right now. I can get away with this in the introductory class. Probably 3 or 4 days from that, I'm gonna have to be more precise. But Ori, you're spot on as usual. That you hear that. I'm gonna rephrase that for everybody in case you missed it the first time. So Ori's distinguishing. He says, there's a general problem. It feels like the bad guys are living it up in luxury, and meanwhile I'm just toiling along trying to be a decent guy, and it never goes well for me. And then conversely, of course, it feels like very, very fine people seem to be suffering. That seems to be gross injustice. Then, secondarily, and certainly overlapping with this, is the idea that it just feels all kind of like there's no rhyme or reason for it. And we're also vulnerable. And we're also subject to the elements. I mean, I don't know how you're feeling these days. I'm going into, I have a weird life. I'm going into derech every day. I'm one of the three of us on staff in the morning and 4 in the afternoon. We go in, I have a special paper in case the police stop me. I'm allowed to go. Everybody, I mean, Israel's eerily quiet.
Are they really doing that in Israel?
What's that?
Are they doing that in Israel? You have to get proper, like...
Well, I don't know, but it's fairly strict. And, you know, I think probably with good reason, they're really trying to discipline the population that's used to its civil liberties and wants to be out and about. And they're trying to get it through our thick skulls, you know, through all of our denial that there's something quite serious. Hi, Marcel. Quite serious going on. And so most people are just home. You know, I mean, I'm enjoying the commute. There's no traffic. But when I get into yeshiva, right, like, you know, we're there, and it's 22 highly motivated people. Those of you who are there this year, there are a bunch of you I'm looking at right now. You'd be very impressed by your colleagues. They're rising to it. We're having wonderful minyanim, and we're learning well. But we're one of the only institutions that's permitted to be open because it's an overseas school with students who are who have no other place to go. If somebody left Derech to go to an uncle, they're not allowed to come back, or anybody in Or Sameach. About 70 people in Or Sameach altogether, 22 in Derech. And we're all wearing masks, which I teach for the mask all day. It is the pits. You know, about 7 minutes, I got it down to a science now. It's about 7 minutes in, the mouth goes dry. A few minutes later, the mask goes moist. I tried to convince my mask and my mouth to trade, but they don't cooperate. And then all the guys have it too. Now, I figure my wearing the mask is really a chesed for them, but it's a tough go. We sit at least a meter or two apart. It's weird. And I wash my hands all the time, and I know that's what you're supposed to do, but Shama, you can identify with this. They get dry after a while, right? And if you're OCD, anybody OCD out there, you could just go crazy with this. And this general sense, I mean, I'm trying to convey what's going on with my life right now, because, you know, and I'm sure we could all trade stories. The sense of vulnerability, you know, you go in, I want to do a shopping to feed my family, you go into these stores. You don't know if somebody touched the bamba and put coronavirus on the bamba bag, right? And so you wash your hands, but then you touch the sink and you want to wash your hands again because maybe it's on the sink. And then you scratch your temple and you think, wait, when they say you don't touch your face, does that include the temple area? You know, and then like endless kinds of calculations to really reinforce this great fragility, being alive in the world. And the truth is, I guess, you know, all that's always true, but it takes a crisis like this to really highlight it and make it so real for us. And
I don't have it.
What's that? Yeah. Okay. So Iyov appears to be a decent guy. He doesn't seem like he does anything. In fact, we'll see in the beginning when we get to the first chapter, he doesn't seem to have any flaws, at least nothing notable. Chazal say otherwise, presenting the oral tradition. They have some pretty strong criticism of Iyov. But the text itself makes him seem blameless. And certainly Hashem sees Iyov in very positive ways. He doesn't suggest that Iyov did anything to deserve what he goes through. He goes through quite an ordeal. We're going to see some context. We'll try to understand maybe Iyov is not the angel that he seems to be, which I guess also is something that's universal. Most of us are also not the angels we present ourselves as, rabbis included, or should I say rabbis especially. there's a question and something that if anybody wants to pursue this, I would love to learn from you. Meaning, I'm going to throw out questions. I really don't have the answers to these things. If you have your own, if you could present hot suggestions, I'd be delighted. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu, when he presents the story of Iyov to us, why does he present it in a way that leaves out any mention of Iyov's faults? What's he trying to convey to us? Maybe again, it's meant to look, maybe Iyov is supposed to look like us. Like on the surface, we're such rosy-cheeked, nice guys. I mean, look at everybody out there, right? The nicest people in the world, right? It takes sometimes the deeper perception that Chazal have to draw out the real problems, the hypocrisies, the things that we sublimate and we tend to deny.
Also, a lot of the time we kind of look at ourselves in general like that, and we find it hard to like criticize ourselves. I know that's not true because we do criticize ourselves a lot, but it's like that. It's like when you have to actually sit down and look at yourself and say, like what my faults are. Like it's hard to express it or think about it at that point. So I'm thinking that if Iyov, if we were presented with, oh, Iyov was this bad, he had such and such a fault, and then all this bad stuff happens, we say, oh, that's Iyov, that's him. But and like that's why those bad things happen to him. But if we're presented with this guy who we don't necessarily know, like what's going on behind the scenes, maybe he'd be more relatable to us.
Right. Well, we're gonna see a lot. People are trying to get in. I'm sorry. Elior. Yeah, we're gonna see a lot behind the scenes, and I'll try to fill in the blanks. But I think you're onto something. Welcome, Aaron Ekmati. Very nice to see you.
Shalom, always a pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Is this always? I'm so new at this Zoom thing. Is this always what happens in Zoom? People come, people go. Yeah, this is your experience. Okay. Anyway, I'm thrilled to have you all here. We're talking about Iyov, anybody who came in late, and we're talking about him as quite an enigma. Winston Churchill looked at Russia and he said Russia was an enigma wrapped in a mystery, wrapped in a conundrum. I mean, it's just layers and layers of mystery that we will be unpacking in our days together. The problem of tzaddik viralo, which is the way it's referred to. The words mean a righteous person, but it seems bad for him, which seems to be a basic inherent contradiction. There's an easy potential answer, maybe the almost obvious answer that you could give. Anybody, I mean, what comes to your mind? How do you address, on a most fundamental basis, how do you address righteous people who suffer?
Can I ask a clarifying question? This tzaddik veralo, are you saying it's a person who acts like a tzaddik but really shouldn't?
No, I think we could take it at Pashup Pshat. He's a tzaddik, at least to the best of our understanding of what a tzaddik is, and he suffers terribly. And we have many examples of such people.
All right, fine. Perfect. Got it.
I mean, without getting too complicated, we can get complicated, but let's try at least for opening definitions. Let's try to understand basics. How might you, in the most simple, obvious kind of a way, answer the implicit problem of tzaddik viralo, that a righteous person suffers in this world?
I mean, the Ramchal speaks about it at length at certain points.
It says that like even righteous people have a little bit of sin, and to make sure they're good to go to the next world, isn't it that they have a bit of suffering here? They don't
Excellent. That's the easy way. Well, right. Ein tzaddik v'lo yechata, the pasuk says. There's no tzaddik in this world who doesn't sin. Although Chazal say, some of us learned brachos last year, the Gemara does say that there's certain tzaddikim who suffer in this world not because of their sins. One of their approaches, and we'll talk about this, is they say there's a phenomenon that a person suffers yisurin shel ahava. You know the expression yisurin shel ahava? It means that Hashem sends you suffering as an expression of his love. What? Right? How could that be? Well, it means a person's pure and great, and the suffering takes you up several notches. It actually removes any defect and gives you a bigger, better portion of the world to come. Such a concept of Tzadik V'Ra'lo. Before we get fancy, though, the simple approach, and Aviel, you were just alluding to it, is that, oh, okay, yeah, he's suffering in this world. He'll get the next world. That'll be the solve. Okay, this world, anywhere. It's a pros door, as the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos. It's a corridor. We're passing through. Nish geferlach, no big deal. We'll get the real dividends then. That's not an answer. And the reason it's not an answer is because the Torah says that's not the answer. It says it in a few different ways, but probably here's the most explicit one. We read this actually pretty recently on Shabbos Chol HaMoed. We read this pasuk where Moshe Rabbeinu, in the context of talking to Hashem around the Chet HaEgel, Moshe Rabbeinu requests, he says, Hareini na es drachecha, show me your ways. Moshe asked a few things from Hashem. In this pasuk, he asked, show me your ways. Chazal say, he means this. He says, show me why the world doesn't, at least to our own physical, shallow reading of it, the world doesn't make sense. It feels unfair. Explain to me why the righteous suffer and why the wicked prosper. Anybody know famously what Hashem answers there? I'm not talking now Chazal. I'm talking straightforward psukim. It's the same section we read on fast days as well. It's the 33rd chapter of Shmos. Anybody know what? Remember what Hashem answers?
So you have to die, no?
Yaakov, that's you, right?
Yeah.
One notch higher.
Oh, all right.
You got it. You're nailing it.
I'm trying to remember the pasuk.
As expected.
It was Ani Avir Kol Tuvi Al Panecha Vekarati B'Shem Hashem Elokecha. The Chanoti, I think,
Pay attention. V'chanosi, keep going. Es.
Asher Achon V'Richamti Es Asher Arachem.
Translate.
I shall pass all my goodness over, and I gotta remember it again, over your countenance, and I shall have mercy. No, first, I don't know, the Chayin is such a strange, I'll have grace on what I want to have grace on, and I'll have mercy on what I want to have mercy on, something like that.
That's right. That's a fine translation. And now, can you explain what did it, okay, so Moshe just asked at a pivotal point in history, right? We're just about to get the Yud Gimel Midos. It's a big chapter right now, the 33rd chapter of Shmos, right? And he says, show me your ways, by which Chazal understand he's asking our question, a perennial, ageless question. How does the universe work? And Hashem answers him. And the answer means, the drum roll, please. Ooh, silence out there. Wow, I got all these telling me to humming in presence and nobody has an answer.
It's not for people to know. It's like Hashem's.
Right?
I always. It's above our pay grade. It's above our pay grade. It's for corporate only.
BZ, I didn't understand. Say it one more time. It wasn't clear.
It's not our pay grade. It's for corporate only.
Yeah. I'll have compassion upon who I'll have compassion on. I have this one down, Hashem is telling. Now, he's not telling us nothing. He's not giving us a non-answer. He's telling him confidently, I have my ways. What appears to you to be arbitrary, to me is quite deliberate. I'll have compassion about one I have compassion on. There's a rhyme and a reason to all of this. You're just not going to get it. And that's going to be very hard for you because you're going to want to get it. You're going to want to understand.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
When I think about this idea, I always think back to that one Gemara of a person who's up on a tree and he's trying to retrieve eggs to go and give to his father. So while he's doing Shiluach HaKan and Kibud Avayim, he falls off and dies. And the reward for those two things is to get a long life. So it's like, what are...
Right. It's the Gemara at the end of the first chapter of Kiddushin.
And then I always think, like, it's our job to just do follow the guidebook, follow the rules, do the job. And then if we can't understand past, if we do our best to understand, and if we can't understand past, then we understand that Hashem has everything and it's all meaningless. Like Hashem makes an accounting of all our good and bad deeds and has everything.
Right. So actually it turns out to be Acher's grandson there in the Gemara, Rabbi Yaakov, addresses it and says that we're not meant to understand these things. The problem, though, problem with this, though, even though Moshe asked the question, Hashem gives him an answer. The Torah itself says that there is reward in this world. The Torah, think of Kriya Shema and many other examples, but Kriya Shema is probably the most immediate and obvious. Kriya Shema says, keep my mitzvahs, and if you do, I'll make it rain. Your harvests will be plentiful. You'll be wealthy. You'll have prosperity. And the Pashut Pshat of these, according to Chazal, is that's in this world, meaning there should be some kind of dividend. So if you behave yourselves, it'll work out, and if you don't, it won't work out. So you can't say then, I mean, Hashem has some kind of an answer, but what you can't say is that the answer is Olam Haba. It'll all work out in Olam Haba. No, the Torah says it should also work out in this world. Okay, that's our conundrum. That's the challenge that we're setting out for ourselves. We're certainly not going to resolve all issues tonight. I want to just set up a puzzle and a way of thinking about Iyov before we really launch in earnest tomorrow. But first, Bizi, go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask, are we going to be discussing this class with the idea that God is the sole proprietor of reward and punishment?
Again, it wasn't so clear. Are we doing this with the assumption that Hashem is
the only person who can give us reward or punishment? That the fate of our reward and punishment is only in God's hands when it comes.
I mean, that is the traditional Jewish view. What would be the alternative?
Well, I'm just thinking because even in Judaism, Chazal was given the responsibility of enacting punishment for us, the stoning, hangings, whatever it is.
Oh, I hear you saying maybe in human hands we're supposed to do something about that.
Yeah, could the reward and punishment that we're given be also faltered by human hand, or is it straight from God to our lives?
Yeah, so I'll hit that straight on. It's a great question. I'm glad you're asking it. Let's like deal with this right here and now. Again, I'm talking from straight tradition here, Chazal. We never assume that absolute justice is in human hands. We did in my, who out there might have seen my Shiur's Purim spiel this year? A few of you. I don't see you. By the way, anybody taking this for credit, the deal is I'm supposed to be able to see you because otherwise you could be multitasking. If you're getting credit for this, you should be participating. But okay. My Purim spiel deals with, we're learning Makos this year. Aaron Rice, we did it your year. We also did a fantastic Purim spiel. You were the Eidim Zomnim with Barak. Memorable. Anyway, in our Purim spiel, our major theme was playing up this idea that it's actually extremely unlikely that the human base team will actually punish you. And then the famous last Mishnah in the first chapter of Makos, that the court that hangs, it's machlokas tanaim, how frequently, but the very, very seldom do they actually execute a murderer. The setup of our spiel is Yossi Dixler is the protagonist who's trying to get an insurance buyout. So he's trying to be convicted of death, and everything he does fails. He can't be chayav misa as much as he tries. So that was the gimmick of the spiel. But the serious subtext to all of that is that we never place our hopes for justice in human hands. The reason for courts, for Sanhedrin, is there can't be anarchy. We need to be there has to be a justice system in this world. But as a basic corollary, we understand that that's just trying to do it to the best of our human ability. We think that ultimate justice can only come from Hashem. Yeah. So I'm pointedly addressing that question, Bizi. We don't think that any other agent in the universe has the ability to do it properly. Only Hashem, and that's why we call him Dayan Ha'emes. He's the only judge of truth, the only one who's sitting there. I mean,
can it be done?
How can it be otherwise? Because really, consider this. It's totally relevant to Tzaddik Varalo too. Consider, everything has to be factored in. To be totally fair, picture yourself as a little kid who gets in trouble for something. But don't you know that I was in duress? And don't you know that relative to me, I have such a Yetzer Hara, it's so hard for me to resist taking the cookie from the cookie jar. So for a person like that, the punishment should be X. But for a person who doesn't really want the cookie and takes it anyway, he should get a more severe punishment. Right? There's so many nuances, in other words, when it comes to enacting justice. And it's all subjective, it's all relative to us as an individual. And there's such a sliding scale in all of this that only Hashem can take the myriad variables and add them up, keep track of everything. This notion on Rosh Hashanah that there's a book written with all of our sins, with all of our merits, and somehow they're all factored in, and your sins and my sins are not the same, we're not judged the same way. The tzaddikim are judged on a very, very high level. That's why they're punished severely for something that for you and me, we'd get away with. We wouldn't even be punished for. But they get treated harshly because all of these are variables that only Hashem, only a divine, infinite being who keeps track of every last detail could possibly enact real justice. So yes, decidedly, we think that this is only in Hashem's hands. And yet, again, to our own finite observation of the world, it doesn't seem to pan out. We don't always understand how this works, and that plagues us. That's a source of suffering for a lot of people, and it certainly is for Iyov. Last thing I'm going to do, actually the second to last thing I'm going to do in the Iyov unit of tonight is I'm going to set up a logical problem. And it's one we're going to have to try to tease out in our time together. And then the last thing I'm going to do is just hang out informally if anybody wants to talk, Q&A, and just ask any follow-up questions. I'll be available for that as well. So here's the logical problem that Iyov essentially sets up. The book of Iyov sets up. There's a premise, and this is mathematics. Number one, running with the premise that Hashem is just. Hashem wouldn't hurt an innocent man. He's just. Number two, at least Iyov argues, he says, I'm innocent. Number three, Iyov asserts, I'm suffering, I'm being afflicted. Okay, these three problems don't meld together. It's the basic contradiction. Now, there are a lot of people who've dealt with this. I'm not going to really go into any depth, but there are non-religious people who deal with this. There's a conservative rabbi. Anybody heard of the name Harold Kushner? He's a best-selling author. Nobody? Harold Kushner comes up. He wrote a book that's. I remember when I was teaching in Reform synagogue, we used it as a textbook, and we looked at Job, but so superficially now in retrospect. It was embarrassing. My mentor was the nephew of one of the Poskei Ador, but he went off the derech. The rabbi in the Reform synagogue went off the derech. Some of you remember who that was. His Harold Kushner's book is When Bad Things Happen to Good People. Nobody? Not familiar? Anyway, Kushner's approach. Kushner writes semi-autobiographically. What was his story? I think he had a son who died in a car accident. And then, as so many people endure in life, experience in life, he and his wife and family go through excruciating pain and suffering, and also set up this kind of this mathematical problem. Hey, we're just. Hashem is just. We're good. We're innocent, but we're suffering. What gives? How do we? What do you have to say? So Kushner's conclusion is certainly a non-Jewish conclusion, conservative rabbi. He decides that Hashem is not all powerful. We call that kind of kfira, kind of heresy. That's one non-answer that we're not going to give. We'll see the friends of Iyov, and put friends in quotation marks. The friends will suggest that it's possible that Iyov didn't get the equation quite right. They more than insinuate that Iyov, in fact, is not quite so righteous. In the first way they say it, they try to say it very nicely. They're kind about it. As you track this story as it goes down, you could see the friends starting to lose their cool. They clearly lose their patience. And especially what seems to be, because Iyov is not taking their credit and their comfort very well, they take it personally, it seems, when they won't accept their comfort. And then they outright accuse him of being guilty, and that's why he's suffering. And so it's not such a, and I guess if you answer it that way, then we basically, the whole kasha falls flat. There's no kasha. You're guilty, Iyov. Deal with it. Some comforters.
Yeah, I feel like that answer is kind of just like a cop-out within the system of reward and punishment that we know it as.
It seems to be, certainly, it's tempting. A lot of people go that way because it's, on some level, it's a balm. It's soothing to hear that. Oh, he deserves that. Look, I was, when I was describing the reaction to, some people have the anti-Haredi, anti-religious Jews who say, oh, well, they're getting the coronavirus because all those religious Jews, they gather together way too much and they deserve it for all those minyanim, or those women are going to the mikveh. Right? Let them get it. Right? Let them get it. They deserve it. That's God's punishment for them for being such fanatics. Right? So that's their way of saying also, this is a way of solving theodicy. Right? They deserve it. It's God's punishment. We don't accept that answer. That's not and the Mefarshim, you will see, are very, very strong in their criticism of Iyov's friends for treating him this way. One of the things that we're going to learn is that the friends who come ostensibly to comfort Iyov are actually a study on what not to do when you're paying a shiva call, or when you're trying to be there for your own friends, your own family who are going through ordeals. In the end of the book, and I don't want to give away too much of the end, it's way too good and juicy. I hope a lot of you stick with me and we get there. At the end of the book, Iyov ultimately asks Hashem himself, and Hashem comes in the end. Be careful what you ask for. Hashem does come in the end, and it's again, as I say, it's quite overwhelming, and he gives quite an answer. But I'll leave a bit of a cliffhanger on this. Tomorrow night we'll talk about who Iyov was, and is there an entertaining range of possibilities? It's quite right. Why? Does anybody have any questions or insights? I'm also open to feedback, including is this the wrong format to do this? I don't know what we're doing. We're all stuck in quarantine, right? I'll tell you, I was hoping for
no other format.
I know what we're gonna do. So again, my encouragement. Let's stay on this. Let's communicate. I'm old fashioned. I like email. So if you want to write, that's my best way. That's the best way. I'd love to be in touch anyway. I'm happy to do a Zoom session. Anybody wants to, if we can figure out a time. And don't feel shy. I mean, I know there's a bunch of people here, but doesn't mean that I hope you get to know each other. It's a very special group I'm looking at right now. Some of you know each other. Most of you might not know every name here. You would all love each other if you did know each other. Anybody else have anything? Great. Okay, so we'll call it, it's an hour. We'll call it a close to the Iyov section. Those of you who are taking this for credit, you're set. But I'll hang out if anybody wants to schmooze.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, great to see you tomorrow night. See you tomorrow.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Yo, Rabbi,
Thank you, Rabbi.
what's like Corona in Israel right now? Can you tell me all of what do the streets look like? Stores open? Are they not? Are they what are the
so?
What are
What it looks like right now is things were very strict, and Israelis are pretty good, not perfect, but pretty good because they're used to wars and discipline and such. Ari Swift, you'll help me if I'm not presenting it right. Maybe Ari's in the army here, so he has a different experience than I do. But for a long stretch over Pesach, it was silent. I went for a walk. I'm not doing my run in the forest these days, but I went for a walk around, most of you know Telstone, just around the block, like nothing, right? And the police pulled over and said, what are you doing? And I gave them my Tudat Zahut. They said, hello, Mark. Because I never changed my name from Mark to Menashe. Hello, Mark. And, what are you doing more than 100 meters from your house, which is against the law? And I didn't get a ticket that time, but they were pretty.
100 meters? That's
pretty
the rule
harsh.
right there.
What?
100 meters is out from your home. Yeah, that's the.
Well, that was the rule then. Now you're allowed to go 500 meters. Yay. Right, so now it's 500 meters. But now, this week particularly, I mean, they're very concerned, like everybody is. Nobody knows how to do this right. Are we ever, I mean, what a time to talk about Iyov. We are so vulnerable. You know, they're concerned now that that the implosion of the economy in the world and in Eretz Yisrael particularly is going to actually be more devastating than the coronavirus. I mean, already, I think last week, apparently the story is a vendor in Machane Yehuda committed suicide because of the implosion of his business. Right, so the tragedies are multi-layered. There's another tragedy here. I imagine this must be happening in every part of the world. A young woman, 19, I think, had an ear infection, and because of her fear of coronavirus, she didn't want to go to get the emergency treatment that she needed because she didn't want to be exposed to coronavirus, so she died at home of the ear infection. Anyway, so that's, still people now, because they loosened the restrictions this week, people are going to work somewhat, essential businesses, and it's a little eerie still. I mean, driving through the streets of Yerushalayim.
What's considered essential business in Israel?
Well, those are also, the subject is being changed and loosened as we go. They're lightening up as the days pass. So initially it's just, food and pharmacies. And then now a lot of private businesses are permitted to open up. They haven't opened up the malls. They have opened IKEA. These things are not always so rational or thought through. They're debating about how to open up the schools. They're doing it. I think they're going to start doing just the younger grades in shifts, so people can come in small groups. In yeshiva, for example, we're allowed to be open, but the health ministry, one of their many restrictions is we can only have classes of 7 students and 1 teacher, each sitting at least a meter or 2 apart. And that way there's, the distancing, and, that's how we kind of do it. And the derech facility, it's not always easy. We do our best. It's not perfect.
Who's in charge of making these laws? Federal government or city government?
Your audio is terrible, BZ, and I hope you don't take that personally. It came out not clear. And now you're frozen. I love the Zoom thing. I love it when people's isn't it Ben Richmond and I were just talking about this. Doesn't it great when somebody like freezes because their Wi-Fi stinks? So they go, they freeze in like one of these positions. So entertaining. Yeah, go ahead. BZ, say what you just said again. I didn't hear you. You're frozen again. Okay.
Who's in charge of deciding like all those type of laws, essential business and stuff? Is it the city government or is it the federal government?
No, it's the government. I mean, from the prime minister and down.
The government.
Yeah. I mean, Israel's small enough they can
fine.
do that, right? It's not. I mean, there's no difference between federal and state. It's just, it's the government of the state.
Well, in this, you have your federal and you have your city governments. You have your mayors and you have.
That's true. There's municipal governments. That's fair, true. Yeah, but everybody's working in tandem. In Telstone, where I live, we were hit initially. We were one of the earlier places. Some woman came back from France and went for a Purim party, so we got it early, about 30 cases or so. But because it hit us early, I think it came to our advantage in the end because people took it really seriously, really early, when most other people were in denial and kind of joking around about it. So apparently, I don't believe the stats. I don't believe anybody's really being forthcoming with all the information. But apparently, we don't have so many or any new cases. But all kinds of other places that didn't take it seriously are really coming down with a lot of cases. It's just I'm aware of people having it and not reporting it for whatever their reasons are. Maybe they're worried about stigma or problems with their careers. I don't know, but I'm sure a lot of it's out there. I mean,
people personally.
Say it louder.
People personally that had it but didn't get.
I don't know if it's real. I mean, somebody suggested that there was. I don't know, and we really trying to avoid lashon hara, but apparently somebody knew somebody who had it and wasn't disclosing it. They weren't going out; they were self-quarantined, but they were not advertising it either, for whatever their motivation.
Rabbi, that's what I would say if I had it personally. I know somebody who knows somebody who has it.
Right. I mean, it's certainly a time of conspiracy theory. I don't know what you make of this. Somebody just told me this, that in China, the phone company says they're about some up in the millions of people, or I don't know, maybe not million, I don't know the numbers, a staggering number of people who have no phone bills for the last few months. Well, doesn't that
China's definitely misrepresenting their numbers.
The numbers, right?
100%.
I mean, what might explain that? Perhaps a lot more deaths that are being reported. Iran, I think one of the ministers of health in Iran said they probably have 500,000, but the government's not reporting. So I don't know if, what we know is really anywhere close to accurate. Yeah.
Rabbi, I had a question. Are you halakhically allowed to do the work of other people?
What would be the problem?
Like let's say they had an essay assigned to them and they give it to you to do. Are you allowed to do that?
Well, yeah. You're full circle. Eden's gone by now, but Eden opened with a related question that has to do with the subject of Bleiweiss das, which means misrepresenting. You're not allowed to misrepresent. Classic examples: if you're an apple vendor, you can't put the shiny apples on top with the hopes that they'll take them without looking and get a bunch of the rotten apples. You should represent your merchandise accurately. And the same way here, you can certainly do that and simply sign your name and say, I did this person's homework for him, and then submit it to the teacher. And that way everybody's being honest and there's no misrepresentation, and he'll probably get an F.
But isn't the onus on the person that's submitting it?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he's over Bleiweiss das. But on some level, if you're facilitating him, you're, if not a lifnei iver, lifnei iver means putting a stumbling block before the blind, which that may not quite sound like. There's another problem, another rabbinic problem called being misayeya l'davar avera. You're aiding and abetting somebody who's leading a dishonest life. Why would you want to be a part of such a thing? I mean, if you know that's what he's going to do, why would you be a part of that?
Right. Okay.
Unless somehow he's going to be totally forthright with his teacher and say, hey, this isn't my work, but I'm going to submit it anyway as my own. I don't know why a person would do that, but we're midvar sheker tirchat, says the pasuk. We're supposed to distance ourselves from lies. We're supposed to be vasisa yashar vatov b'nei Hashem, the pasuk says. You should do what's honest and good in God's eyes, and this one's kind of a no-brainer. Be upfront. If a guy's got a test, he got a homework assignment, the teacher wants to see that he's doing it. Okay, bye, VZ. Nice to see you.
It just sounds like he's outsourcing his homework. We do that all the time in the business world.
Yeah. So, would the money have no bracha in it, let's say?
Possibly. Look, if it's done all the time to the point that it's expected and almost a given, and people even know this is a commonplace thing, it may not even be false representation then. Maybe it's not even Bleiweiss das. I don't know if anybody remembers, one of my stories that I tend to repeat from year to year is the one about the guy who wanted, after cheating through high school, and now he's making tshuva and he wants to be on the up and up. He asked, should he write the university that he was accepted to attend after attending yeshiva in Israel? Should he write the university now and tell him that some of his grades were not earned honorably? And part of the answer included the insight that the university is so used to cheating that they know when they accept the guy, probably the average applicant is guilty of cheating. So he's not totally misrepresenting himself. If this is a given in the world out there, then it may not be an actual problem. But then again, look, Vasisa Yashar Batov Ben Hashem. Jews should not hold ourselves to be average guys. We should be above board. We should be better than that. So hold yourself to a good standard.
Okay. It's just that, in this time, since we're stuck at home, I need some means of making income. That's the thing.
What can I tell you? The money comes from Hashem. Gemara in Beitzah says that all the money set up in Rosh Hashanah, you just have to. We do our ishtadlus. We move papers around. That's what money making is. We move papers around. But by us, we're the anti-Machiavellian religion. It's the means justify the ends. Do everything in a way with utter integrity. Be proud when you go to Olam Haba to say, this is my record, this is how I made my money.
Since we're on the topic of Rosh Hashanah, how do we find the balance between Rosh Hashanah and, so we know Rosh Hashanah is time took of Miyamus, and we also know what happened, we know right now we're in the midst of a Megillah, and so at what point, like we know we're taking all the precautions needed, but at what point do we, are we doing too much Ishtadlus? At some point it's been written whether or not we're going to make it through this plague. I mean, Hashem, everyone will, but, so how do we find the balance there between Hishtadlus and, I guess, the whole Mihiya Miyamus?
You're asking a great question that's way too long for at the end, and I'm sure we've done this before. I'll give you one approach to the question, and that is that it's a sliding scale. The greater the person's bitachon, which means his understanding, his internalized understanding that Hashem runs the universe, the less hishtadlus he has to do. The weaker he is in faith, he doesn't really believe that Hashem does it, well then he's going to have to work much harder. And
So
like
then
that.
on the side, a lot of people are criticizing like the minyanim here, and or in the United States, have been going on. I mean, they've more so in the U.S. because the Rove Post in the U.S. have said minyanim are usher.
Go to minyan.
Right. So
right.
At the same time, could we be saying are they chassid shota, or are they or are they misguided?
You can call them are you all familiar with the idea of a chassid shota? The guy who's the example in the Gemara, the guy who won't save the drowning girl because he's shomer negia. Right? I mean, it's funny, but we know people like this, right? That's called a chassid shota, a fool who's masquerading as a righteous man. He's not righteous at all. He's an idiot. And you're saying the same thing here. The poskim are saying, don't go to minyan. They feel in their religious self-righteous, they're going to minyan. I guess you can call him a chassid shota. My inclination is to be, I guess it depends on the person, but I being Malam and Slus, I want to be more generous. I think that, look, really, literally, if you look at the post-scheme, going to minyan is really not all that important in the scheme of things. You can skip it in favor of a lot of other more important things. And it's true, you go to minyan, you get to Varim Pishab Gedush, you can say Amen Yeshmei Rabbah, which is one of the great things we can say, but still, okay. But I think with people, going to minyan is so symbolic of our making an effort towards Hashem on a daily basis, and thereby not going to minyan feels so prust, feels so irreligious. They feel like they're just like they're fried. They're off the derech. They're not going to minyan, and that's so hard, especially if you've been training yourself, especially if you've been doing this all of your life. But if it's in you to do that, it just feels, I'm not going to minyan. Shagets. That's how a person feels.
And then at Chol Moed, and we're not only not going to minyan, but we're not putting on tefillin either,
Oh, right. And then you're not hearing Kriyas Torah. It just doesn't feel like I'm doing it. And for a lot of people, honestly, such a Yetzer Hara comes in, not going to minyan, you sleep in, you get up, you don't get up. I mean, the day loses its structure. I mean, that's what minyan does for us. It gives us it gives us that social responsibility, especially if you're in one of these tiny young Israel type places where you're the 10th man. So you feel like you count, you're part of something. But if it's just you and Hashem and you're davening b'yechidus, just let everything kind of slip. Such a Yetzer Hara generation. So I understand why there's such a strong impulse to go to minyan. Here in Eretz Yisrael, it's similar. The poskim have not been as decisive about skipping minyan, but increasingly they're saying, stay out of minyan. Now, in the current restrictions, we're allowed to daven outside, no more than 19. A little tricky too, because I'll go to across the street. There's a nice outside minyan. I'll go there. I'm usually one of the first guys there. But sometimes in the middle of Shmona Esrei, a bunch of other people have come over to the point that we exceed the 19. But I can't move at that point. I'm in the middle of Shmona Esrei, so I'm going against the law. Here, though, I think there's a different dynamic. Israeli religious Jews are fighters. They are, and they have been since the inception of the state and before. They've been under assault. And so there's almost like this intuitive reaction of like, they're going to tell me to stop to go to minyan. I'm going to dafka go to minyan as a way of showing my allegiance to Hashem. Right? Once you've been trained in that way, it's very hard to feel like you should do anything else. Anyway, great question. Way too deep for now. I don't know if everybody else is interested as well. Anyway, can I ask a question? Two questions about Zoom. Any of you can guide me? One is, I'm supposed to take attendance. I was overwhelmed by the numbers here. And I don't think they really care of the alumni. I do. I want to know who is here because I want to follow up with people. But is there a way on my Zoom program that I can actually find out, just see a list of everybody who was here tonight?
I don't know about an actual list, but I mean, by the way, we're still recording. So
yeah, right.
If we want to turn that recording off,
the recording is also, it'll also have the video?
Yeah, it'll also, Rabbi, did you see all of us? Did you see all of us the whole time, or did you have it on
No,
speaker
people
view?
came and went also. That's what was so disorienting about it.
Oh, right.
To
But
my knowledge, continue, sorry.
I'm saying as long as it was in the gallery view where you can see all of us at the same time, even when people are coming and going, then you should be able to still see when you go back to the recording if you just want to go at a certain frame.
Okay, so I can check the
then you should be able
recording
to-
and see, and I could fast forward and see different frames and see who's around then.
Right. In general,
thank you.
though,
Well, then
we
it's
have the
related to my next question. Since I don't know how to use this, when I press stop recording, where will I find the recording?
So there should be I think it pulls up the file right away. We can test that out right now. I mean, I think we're
fine.
done with the.
Yeah, we're done. So
in
what do
general,
I press? I'm gonna press stop.
Yeah.